So how was lunch for everybody? Good? Ah, there's noises out there. That means you're not sleeping yet. Brilliant. It's always the trick with being put it right after lunch. It's the day when, the time when everyone falls asleep. So hopefully we'll keep you awake with excitement, sounds, magic. So when I was asked to do a presentation, Hans said, well, what do you want to talk about? That was a really good question because I use Opensuse, have for years, but I don't contribute to it. I quite appreciate that you folks all make it, and I thought, well, what can I talk about? And since it was the first day, and I wanted to keep you guys awake and entertained, I thought I wouldn't talk about anything too technical, but rather talk about the reason why we're all here, right, which is free software. So if I was to ask you, and please shout out some ideas or some answers, if I was to ask you what is the best feature of Opensuse in your mind, or like one of the best features, what would it be? Not all at once.
Diversity. Choice.
Diversity? Sorry? Yes. Cool. Upstream people. All right, these are all good answers, right? I don't think that's the best feature, though. And I'd like us to think about what is the best feature of free software. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this question is because when we hear about free software today, whether it's in the media or talking about it with each other online, free software, and particularly with the poster child of Linux, it has become like a superhero of technology, right? It is, well, yeah, world freaking domination, right? That used to be a joke, and it kind of has happened somehow. Linux is #1 in so many fields. I mean, supercomputing, that's been a while, but I mean, we own that space. Mobile computing, how many people here have an Apple device, like an iOS device? Right. How many people here have an Android or some other, yeah, that's called domination right there. And you guys are typical. This is what the world looks like. Maybe not quite that stark, especially not if you're in, like, say, New York where it's a bit different, but most of the world, that is it. Linux has owned that space. What runs in your pocket is free software. That's pretty amazing. Cloud computing. I've heard a lot of people talking about cloud computing. In fact, you were just mentioning it outside, Cornelius, a bit earlier. When you think of cloud computing, unless you're, with Microsoft and think Azure is an awesome name for it, cloud is about free software. Even if you don't run a free operating system in the cloud, you're probably running some free software on that image. So, and without free software, I don't think the cloud would have happened in the way it has. And by the way, I hate that term cloud, but I'll use it anyways because all the cool kids do. Free software has also become #1 in a lot of individual application categories, and I won't bore you all with listing them. It's also considered now a leader in innovation. When we talk about configuration management, when we talk about things like cloud, when we talk about replicated, distributed key value stores, all the cool things, right? When we talk about languages that you're going to deploy web apps in, right? This is all free software now. This is where the innovation is happening. I remember back, I won't say how many years, but some years ago, and we were always like harassed by, oh, free software doesn't innovate, right? The proprietary companies would come up on stages like this and tell everybody, well, you can use free software if you want, but you realize you're killing innovation in the industry, right? Rubbish. Free software is now leading in innovation. It's where it happens. But that's how we talk about it, right? We talk about free software in terms of almost business goals. Innovation, market share, where are we dominating? That is not what makes free software important. It's what makes it relevant to most people on this planet, but it's not what makes it important, and it's not its best feature. Let's rewind a little bit first. Go back in time. I'm going to bore you with a bit of my own experience with free software, not too much, hopefully. But I think that by telling a story about it, maybe we can identify together what the real best feature of free software is. So Marcus and I actually have something in common that I didn't know, and that was that we both found Linux in 1994. Coincidence. I found it in a bookstore. I was actually picking up a book on SunOS. They just released a new thing. It was going to be called Solaris or something weird. And so I was like, oh crap, I got to go upgrade my skills. So I ordered a really thin, expensive book, and I was waiting. It came into the bookstore in the little town I lived in, and I went in to go and get it. And she went into the back to, the woman who owned the store went into the back to grab my book, and $80 book this thick, ridiculous. Thank you, son. And so I was looking on the bookshelf, and there was this book called Slackware something or other. It's like, Slackware, what the hell is that? Is that for like slackers or something? That's ridiculous, what a stupid name. I picked it up and I looked at it and it said it was a full Unix-like operating system. I was like, bullshit, that's not true. No way. I looked at the price, it was like $40, half the price of the book I was buying that was just a manual for proprietary operating system. It's like, oh, okay, well, what hardware does it run on? It's like, oh, it'll run on your 386. I was like, no, that's not. So I bought it because like, that's ridiculous, that's not true, I'm gonna take it home. And it was true. For me, that was like a mind-blowing experience, right? I started out on very first coding job I had. I was sitting in front of a machine that was worth more than I made in a year, and I tapped and tipped away into a text editor, making it do things. Text editor was actually free software, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know about free software. But this book told me this Linux thing is happening, and that was amazing. Went back to my high school the next year, actually, just to catch up with what was going on. I'd helped raise funds to do a fiber optic network. This is in '94. Actually, we raised the funds in '92, but it took a while for them to come through and for us to get enough volunteers to pull cable. And we wired the entire campus with fiber. That was awesome. And then they needed something to run on it. And they were like, we're going to use Nobel NetWare. I was like, no, don't do that. I mean, yeah, it's cool and all that, but the future is TCP/IP. It's the internet. You should be running everything. And you don't have to, like, don't waste the money that we raised on, there's this free operating system you can install. It's called like Slackware Linux. And you can have everything, including this new thing called a web server, and it's going to be amazing. One of the kids who actually ended up setting up that system got so turned on to technology because of that, he went to Harvard, got a degree, and has a very successful career now in that. So I mean, Linux was already making changes then, but I mean, we were few and far between. There weren't many of us. It wasn't, though, for another probably 4 years that I heard about this organization and what their message was. The Free Software Foundation. I assume you can read that. But I came to Linux because of features and what it could do, right? The pragmatics. But then I heard about their message. And they were saying, well, you know what? Technology is really important. And the reason why we need to pay attention to it is because right now we're going through a moment in history that's going to be recorded in well, they didn't say this, but this is how I eventually interpreted it. We're living in a moment in time that's going to be recorded in history books. In 500 years from now, kids are going to be opening up their history books and they're going to be reading about the time when the internet happened. We're living that, right? This is tantamount to other moments in history, like the signing of the Magna Carta, which we have a few copies of still, which you can still read because it was on an open format, vellum. Good idea. But this is actually one of the copies that still exists. This changed, or marked at least the beginning of change, in how power was structured in Europe and European countries, including North America. This is still the basis of common law in much of the English-speaking world. All right? We're talking about a document that's centuries old, 800-something years old. We learn about that in school, right? The printing press changed everything as well. It allowed people to put out subversive political ideas as well as body cartoons. It allowed the novel to happen, books you read, right? The stories. This is not possible when you had to hand transcribe things. Who's going to sit there and hand transcribe anything but an important religious document or an important political document? No one's going to transcribe, you know, oh, why Harry met Sally. That's not going to happen. Printing press, you can do this. You can make a business out of it even. And this changed how people communicated. It changed how politics happened. It changed societies. That's why we learn about it, right? Now think about that. Put now into that historical context, that what is happening now with technology and the internet and free software powering all that is one of these moments in history. Okay, so that's cool, but how does that make free software important? Well, a society, any society that is reliant on a technology is only as free as that technology is. Period. Full stop. If we think about the printing press, the churches in Europe used to control the language of religion because religion was one of the few tools of power that was really useful. And by keeping education and literacy bound into a small group of people, you could concentrate that power, right? As soon as there was a democratization of access to literacy, as soon as Bibles were translated into people's native tongues. In Zurich, where I live now, we have a great Bible in the Grossmünster, which is the Zürcher Bibel. It's the first Bible written in the local language at the time. That changed stuff because people had access to information. And from there, the floodgates opened, powers shifted. But as long as it was under control, well, society was hampered. It could only be so free. Our society is reliant on software, increasingly. How many people have gone to a doctor's office and not seen a computer in use? How many people have engaged in a political campaign without using the internet? How many of you have purchased things but never on the internet? How many people don't use email? How many people don't connect with their loved ones via software? This is an amazing revolution that's happened in an amazingly short period of time, right? Software took 50 years or so to kind of get to the point where it was actually useful for the human beings like you and me, not just the scientists that were crunching numbers, right? Code breakers. And once we reached that point, it just, bam, exploded. And our societies have changed fundamentally. It has changed our politics. It has changed our economics. It has changed how businesses are run. It's changed how we connect with our loved ones even. So put this statement, does anybody disagree with that, by the way? Does anyone think that our societies, here at least, are not reliant on software? Yeah, so put that statement and that statement together. And you begin to understand what the most important feature of free software is. Free software sets us free. Without free software, our societies will lose their freedom, whatever freedoms we do have. And through free software, because it is the technology upon which our society is based now, more and more and more, increasingly so. And we forget this because we're fish in water. We no longer see it sometimes. But it's happening. And the freedom of our technology is the limits to the freedoms that we will be able to enjoy in our society. That is free software's most important and best feature. When I realized that, it was one of those like, wow moments, right? I realized that I was living, you always like to think, oh, I'm living in a special time in history. Everyone kind of thinks that. It's usually not true. This is true, though. This is a pivotal moment in history, which is really cool to be a part of. But then to think that, wow, I'm in the industry that's going to be setting limits on freedoms, good or bad. That's really exciting, right? I felt like that kid. That was why in 1998 I made a conscious decision that my career would then be working on top of free software and then eventually creating free software. It happened in the early 2000s for me. It was transformational for me because I realized that software is transformational for society. Now I want to digress for a bit because that's all nice and fluffy, right? Who knows, what is that? I mean, it's a car, but Tesla, right. Is that not the coolest car? No. Liar! It is a pretty cool car, though. And I'm actually stealing this. Is Georg here? Are you here? There he is. So I'm stealing this like wholesale from Georg because we were walking by a small lake where he lives in Küsnacht in Switzerland. And we were talking about, the goals of free software and what makes it interesting and useful and important. And he points out something really, really interesting. He's like, think about electric cars. Electric cars had a really hard time penetrating the market, right? And it wasn't because they couldn't make them. It was because they made them, but they were like ugly. Like who wanted to drive them, right? People would drive them in spite of how they looked, in spite of the fact that they didn't accelerate very well, in spite of the annoyance and awkwardness of charging them and all these other things, in spite of the fact that when you got inside the car, it was just like a regular car except it sucked more. But hey, you were saving the environment, right? And you could, feel a bit better about that. There's only a limited number of people who are going to buy into that concept. And so long after our ability to make electric cars, not many people were driving them. Tesla had a different idea, right? As a company, they're like, no, we're going to make an electric car. Great, fine. But we're going to make an amazing car. We're going to make a car that people want to drive, that happens to be electric, but like they want to drive this car. If it had a gas engine in it, they'd drive it too because they want to. And what happened? Well, electric cars got like really a lot more popular, and people were like proud of how I have a Tesla. It's amazing. Look at it. People, I was at a party last year, and someone pulled up in their Tesla and plugged it in, and people came out and looked at it like, wow, cool, right? It's a cool car. And that was a way of getting the idea of electric cars, whether that's a great idea or not, I'm not going to pass judgment on that, but it was a way to get that concept that struggled actually into the market. Why? Because they made a great product. Not because they made an electric car, they made a great product. Period. So I assume you can probably already see the analogy. We need to make great products. We need to make software people want to use, not because it's free, as in freedom, or free as in no cost. We need to make software that is so damn great that people will use it because it's so damn great. I'm a little concerned about, the earlier slide I said, Linux is #1 in mobile. Free software is as well, but I'm torn about that slide. Because I think that the path that it's going down in the mobile industry is concerning. I'm not sold on the fact that, although free software is powering this movement of, say, Android, I don't know if that's the best. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not the best that can be done. It's probably not what society needs. Right? We talk to companies all the time right now that are finally waking up to the idea that maybe they shouldn't be entrusting all their data and all their communication to a for-profit company with proprietary products that servers they don't have access to and whatnot. This is problematic. But Android is top of the hill. Why? It was good enough, and they put a lot of money behind the marketing and they made it go. People don't use Android because it's free software either, right? I mean, how many, maybe except for you guys, but how many of your family and friends who aren't like technology people, how many of them went, I bought an Android phone because it's got Linux and it's like free software? Please, show of hands. Yeah, 0. No one cares, right? So a lot of those wins for free software happened not because it's free as in freedom, but because they were good products. Cloud is no different. Supercomputing is no different. They weren't like, you know what, our supercomputer should be powered by free software because that's better for society. Nobody said that. They're like, how can we build the most powerful supercomputers ever? And Linux was just there, and it was a good tool for it, right? And they turned it into something amazing. So, I challenge all of you here, both at the Opensuse conference and the Colab conference, summit that starts tomorrow, to think about free software in this way. It's key. Wow, that was cool. See if I can do that again. It's key in terms of limiting or allowing freedom in our societies. It is at the heart of transforming our cultures and our communities. It's really important stuff. But the way we actually get it out there is not by, unfortunately, telling people about free software, because that's a limited, unfortunately, selling point for most people. It also isn't getting hung up on things like it's GNU Linux, which was a disappointment for me with the Free Software Foundation, to be honest, in recent years, that their message has gotten, I don't think many new people, young kids would actually hear the message I heard, 15 years ago from them. The way we get free software out there is by making great products. And the presentations, I was looking through the schedule for this conference, and after me, there's like all of these ones with the little purple circle on it, which is the technology tracks. And I was looking through, I was like, there's some really cool stuff here. The stuff I heard about this morning in the various keynotes, there's some really cool stuff there. I think you guys are making great product, which is what we need. But allow yourself to be driven by that higher goal. Make amazing product, because that is what's going to take us from a possible world where things aren't so great to one where freedom can happen. Free software needs to be our superhero. And you guys are the one who are building it. Thank you. No more of you, get off the stage. I think I've got a few minutes left. Is there any questions, comments, thoughts? Yes. Yep. Yep. Yes. Right. So what I'll just repeat it so people who are watching. It was pointed out that Amazon took Android and made their own device and it talks through Amazon servers, so it doesn't have to always be through Google. I'm so much more happy that it's going through Amazon servers because that's obviously a better company. But I understand what you're saying, and that is that people can take these things and actually repurpose them in perhaps better ways. That is the beauty of free software, right? You're not bound to using it the way you're told to. So at least there is that with Android. That's absolutely true. That said, I don't see a whole hell of a lot of inspiring movement in that direction. But I wish to be proven wrong, right? I hope I wake up in a year and go, I was completely wrong about that. There's amazing things that were happening. I didn't know about them. Completely possible. But yes, at least free software gives us that option, that opportunity. Sorry? Maybe Oracle. Oh, yes. Yeah, what could go wrong? Anyone else? Oh, yeah, sorry. So just to repeat the question, and correct me if I got your question wrong, but basically it's that the business models in free software haven't evolved much, since the FSF was around, perhaps even. And is that a block or is that a problem for free software? Good. He's saying yes, I got it right. Yay. So my thoughts on that. Number one, no one ever says, the problems with chocolate making companies is their business model hasn't evolved. They make chocolate, they sell it to you. Come on, be creative. I don't think the age of the business model is in any way important. What's important is whether the business model works or not, right? If you have a 500-year-old business model that works, great. If you have a 10-year-old business model that doesn't work, yeah. So it's not the age. It's the question of, does it work or not? Obviously, we've seen some companies where it works really well. I think we can all kind of go around the room and say, oh yeah, that company does free software and it works well. This company does free software, it works well. We can also point to a lot of companies where it doesn't. Here's the truth about business. Most startups fail, period, in all industries, right? So failure is not something that you go, oh crap, we're failing. Yeah, that happens in business. But we know that there are business models that do work because there are companies that pay people to work on free software. Who here, put your hands up if you are paid to work on free software. Yeah, so I think there must be a business model here or there that's working. For the people who can't see, it was like pretty much, a lot of people, it was the vast majority actually. Do we need more business models? Yeah, I think so, because that would help with the diversity of the business ecosystem. What I think is more important though is to not look at the business model, but go, what are we trying to drive the business with, right? And that's kind of the point with the Tesla car, right? It's not the model so much. It's that oftentimes companies go out promoting free software either with a non-free agenda around it. That goes back to the Android issue. Or they go out with a product that's either not great or isn't communicated as great, right? To me, that's a much bigger issue in the free software business ecosystem. Because when you get a company that goes out and says, we've got an amazing product, this free software thing is fantastic, and I'm going to tell you exactly how it is fantastic, clearly communicated, get in touch with the possible customers, and some of those companies have gone on to be billion-dollar enterprises. Right? I think that's the problem, not so much the business models. That's a really good question. Yes?
I see a lot of quality products within the open source world. For instance, GNOME or the KDE5 or stuff like that. And actually it's pretty amazing, but if I look at conferences, I see a lot of small companies who are maybe too small to make an impact. So it's maybe not just the quality, but also the mind share.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about that?
So again, we have to realize that for a lot of these industries, we're up against entities that have been around for 30 years or so. Microsoft started with not so many people. right? If you took Microsoft in 1977 and put them here, you'd be like, it's another small company. Cool, right? They all grow, but they've had a head start, right, in many of these areas. In the innovation areas, not so much, right? And there we see, actually, it's easier for such companies to succeed because they're not up against gigantic companies who have mind share, who have taught people this is the way computing should be. XP is the way it should be, right? So it's much easier. Vendor relationships aren't already built, and those are very hard to reinvent in an industry. So yeah, we do have a lot of great products. That's okay that there's small companies around it. What worries me is not that there's small companies now, but that as they start to grow, they start thinking about how they should grow faster, because they all have this idea in their head they should all be like 500 people enterprises in like yesterday. And a lot of these companies start thinking about non-free models. And we're seeing the increasing rise of something that's very worrying to me personally, and that is of things like open core, neo-proprietary models, things that I think undermine, right, and are unnecessary, because there are companies that don't do that are far more successful, and those companies probably ever will be. But it's really tempting from a business perspective. So you look at it and go, you know what, if we use that other business model where we just trade secret sauce for money, right, it's tempting. And maybe we can grow faster that way. I don't think there's actually any really good link to that. And in fact, I know companies that have gone that route, and that was the end of what they were. I think if you all think about it for a bit, you can probably think of some examples of that. So it doesn't concern me that they're small companies. We need to see them grow so that in 20 years, they're big companies. I mean, to talk about Red Hat, because they've been around for quite a while as a company doing Linux, as has SUSE. I mean, both of these companies did not grow from small companies to what they are now in 6 months, right? It took them a long time. So we need to be patient. But in that time of being patient and growing, I think we really need to ensure that people don't fall into that tempting thing of we can grow faster if we abandon free software as a concept. I think it's a rubbish concept. So, anyone else? And you'll tell me when I'm like dead out of time. Yeah, one more.
I don't have to. I don't agree with one of your points or with two of your points. So in the mobile space,
Yep.
the free software is. I mean, it's operating on a Linux kernel, the Android phone, but the rest, I mean, there might be free software, but I'm not allowed to edit it. All the apps I can buy, there's no source code, and it's growing. And this kind of containerization thing, it might even go into software as a service, all the cloud stuff, Facebook, Google. What I'm interacting with, I interact with data and not with code. I cannot change the code on the remote side, so the development is going away. What do you think about it?
So I agree with you in many points. I don't think we disagree, actually. And that's actually why I brought up the point of Android and Google being concerned. 45-minute talk, you can't cover the whole thing. But I agree with you. That is very concerning. What's really concerning to me is that, on the one hand, Google continues to increase the amount of proprietary software, right, that they put on Android, and that they're forcing people to use it to call it Android. They're afraid of losing control of the platform, right? They're afraid of the freedom. Which I think is short-sighted and unfortunate, but that's where they're going. It is undeniable, though, that the world's by far #1 mobile operating system, which is Android, is at its heart mostly free software still. And that's, I think, something that we should be happy about. But at the same time, I agree with you completely. I'm not happy with where it is now. I think it's evolving in the wrong direction right now. For the issue of software as a service or things like online services like Facebook and whatnot, yes, that is a absolutely huge issue. A bone to pick I have with the FSF, for instance, is that they, at one point, until it was pointed out to them by somebody, and they fixed it, they were recommending Gmail because it's free enough. It's like, what? Like, but the application is completely proprietary. Oh, but the JavaScript that runs in your browser, in fact, you can turn it off and you can just have HTML. No, none of that nasty JavaScript. I think that misses the point. And the point is exactly what you said, right? Which is that we're losing access to the software. We need to stop as a community. Number one, we need to, I think, recognize, before I say what I'm about to say, we need to recognize that there are companies like Facebook and whatnot are contributing more and more and more to free software, which is cool, because I'm about to slag them off now. The free software community needs to stop collectively moaning and groaning about it. And we need to roll up our sleeves and get work done. right? That's the whole point of that slide, right? The FSF did not sit back and go, damn, I wish I had an open source compiler and an open source kernel. Man, someone else will make it, and until then I'm going to whine about it, right? That's not how it worked. They went out and did it, and that was insane, because it was a couple of, guys with various social difficulties sitting in an academic environment, hacking on C, up against the behemoths of the world, the IBMs and the Oracles, and all these people were already still, they're already running. And the Sun was coming up in this era, and they were, innovative, aggressive, cool young company. And here are these guys like, oh man, right? Who are they ever going to win? Are they ever? Come on, this GNU thing. But they won. It has entered in many areas, not all, but in many, it has become the dominant way of doing things. We need to remember that lesson. Remember, it also took them, it didn't happen in year 5 or year 10 or year 15, right? But we need to actually do the work and then be patient enough to stick with it. And the people who are doing that work, we need to support them, right? We need to get behind them and use what they make and give them feedback and give them support. So, shameless plug, right now I'm working with Collab, which is actually one of the reasons I'm here, Collab Summit. Groupware, it's a server-side thing. Everyone is being pushed towards a pair of proprietary online services that operate in the cloud and are exactly the kind of applications you talk about. We are working really hard, and I hope that more and more people will support what we're doing, because I think it's very important. We are working very hard to ensure that there's an alternative to this that is free and open. You don't hear a lot of us whining about it so much because it is a dangerous situation, but that's probably because we're stuck in front of our keyboards behind our monitors working as hard as we can on it. And that's what needs to happen. So I have 2 minutes left or something. There was one extra question over here. Yeah, sorry. And feel free to come and harass me the rest of the day. I'll be here. And I do bar mitzvahs and babies, but no, anyways, yeah.
So when you're saying that people are pushed to some other proprietary solutions, and I also kind of have the feeling that a lot of people of the general population, but also a lot of people of the free software population are increasingly using proprietary software to get those things done. Why do you think that is moving in that direction?
So I think that there is an increasing acceptance. There are fewer and fewer hardliners in the free software world, which is normal. Whenever you grow a small group into a large group, you're going to get a more representational segment of society, and it turns out that most people aren't radical, right? So it becomes more pragmatic, and that's fine. That's just growth. We need to identify the proprietary bits and work on replacing them. We need to hold each other. So the people in this room are probably closer to the radicals than the non-radicals, and we need to keep reminding each other about this, because we'll forget, right? That's human beings. So we need to remind each other of this as much as possible, as constantly as possible, support each other in the use of free software. That's why I give presentations like this. I think that's why people like you ask questions like that, to remind us of this. And actually, that's an excellent note to end on. Thank you very much for that. Sorry I can't take all the questions, just find me after. So again, thank you.